Welcome back to another episode of Jacksonville Buzz's Buzzworthy Businesses. I'm Steve Strum. Right next to me, as always, is Dave Permenter. How you doing, man?
Living the dream, my man.
You know what? You and I are really interestingly have an opportunity to live the dream and talk about everybody's dreams. But you're a business owner. I'm a business owner. Our dreams.
Talk about me.
No, I know, but sometimes our dreams can be nightmares. Mr. Irwin over here helps us to understand how to get strategic vision. Who do we have with us today?
Kent Irwin. Kent owns Strategic Vision Coaching.
Yes.
We've met quite a few times in the networking scene in St. Augustine, so it's good to have you here in the studio.
Thank you so much.
On the other side of the ditch.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell us, what do you do? What does Strategic Vision Coaching do?
Well, I work with entrepreneurs and business owners to help them realize what their dream is to begin with, because a lot of times they've forgotten what their dream was. They're wrapped up in their business. They feel stuck, frustrated, stressed out by the day-to-day operations. So when they started their business 10 years ago, they had a vision and a dream of what they thought that would look like. But now they've drifted away from that strategy. They drifted away from those original ideals that they held at one time. And so they're caught up in the day-to-day operations, like the architect who's great at designing these innovative buildings, maybe in the green space, using passive light, using recycled products. Now they spend 10% of their time doing that. Now 90% managing HR, customer service, all the things that make businesses complex. The website, the IT, all those things.
I think we can all relate to that.
As the guys that are watching this video going, yeah, that's me. Thank God this is on a screen that I can hide my head in shame. This is a normal thing that happens for a business owner. It's especially like the Gen 1s, right? So walk us through that. It's not like you're helping people that are doing something wrong. This is everybody goes through it.
Right, because most businesses are bootstrapped on Main Street versus venture capital on Wall Street. So 95% of businesses are bootstrapped. They started them with their own assets, their own hard work. Maybe they got a small business loan, but now they're to the point where they've generated cash flow. They have proof of concept on the original idea, and they have clients, and they're working the business every day, but it overwhelms their life. They might work 60, 70, 80 hours a week on their job or on their business. So it's hard for them to go on vacation and feel like they're free. They have very little time for rejuvenating activities. So their vision, their original vision, sometimes is lost, caught up in all the day-to-day operations of running a business.
And how do you go about remedying that? You must have specific steps, a system, something.
I do have a
framework.
I do have a system, and I do have a process. And it's hard to articulate it in 5 minutes for this, but there is a process of doing it. Usually you start somewhere to arrive at a vision. Now, it might be some work to get to that point, but I want them to understand what it is that they want. What in their core is their vision? And if you were to ask the typical business owner, they may say, well, I want to create this healthcare company that will take care of lots of people and do these amazing things. And I'll say, no, that's the how. That's the solution. What is your vision? What do you want your company to look like? And sometimes it's a process of getting there. But where we would like to end up is, I want to be the number one healthcare provider in my space in Northeast Florida. I want to be that company. So we're going to aim at a big goal, something that's very clear that they want to achieve. Now, how you do it are the next steps. Creating the objectives, and then managing the time, and then measuring those results so that you hit that big vision. But we start with a big vision. If you start with a small vision, your results are going to be small. So we start with a big vision and we shoot for that. And that clarifies what they do on a day-to-day basis to achieve those big goals. And that's in a nutshell what I help businesses do.
This isn't terribly unlike coming in as a turnaround artist.
In a way it is, but we want to make sure we're working with them before they're to the point where they're a turnaround candidate.
Okay.
Because that normally is a sign that they're 6 months to 18 months before bankruptcy or before bills start showing up late. So I want companies that are successful, but they're frustrated and stressed, and they're ready for a change.
They're probably stagnant at that point.
Stagnant's a perfect analogy. And a lot of companies have gone through this. Some of the most successful companies and successful leaders that our industry or that the business world has ever known, they go through the same pattern that I'm talking about. Apple is a great example.
Yeah.
At one time, they almost went out of business. Mm-hmm. They had dozens of products and services, different things that they offered their clients. And their leadership wasn't that great either. They didn't know how to manage people. So Stephen Jobs worked on his leadership. They clarified their goals, what they wanted. They set a big vision, and they went after it. And they focused their resources in key areas that they wanted to grow, and the things that weren't going to contribute to their vision, eventually they eliminated. Mm-hmm. So it's a pattern, and it can work for a small, medium, or a large business.
Awesome.
That's fascinating to hear. And I'm sitting here listening to you, and there's how many people that are in my sphere, right? Clients of mine in the financial services space, myself. There's so many people. It's like almost everybody that I think through. To your point, whether it's Joe the plumber or Steve Jobs, has hit this wall, and it sounds like you give them the tools and the resources that should they want to scale the wall, they can scale the wall,
right.
Or if they just want to run right through the damn thing. Whatever their vision is, you help create that so that they can get into that next gear and really, I'm a first generation business owner. My dad's a firefighter. My brother's in the Army, right? There's a joke there, right? The first 10 years, you rob Peter to pay Paul, and sometimes Paul's dead. And then you spend the next 10 years paying yourself back all the money you borrowed from yourself. Yep. And then that last 10 years is the time that you have that liquidity event. Now, is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Everything's a different cycle. But if you don't hang in there for second and third gear, the only thing you did was, you killed Paul, and you never got to the opportunity to have that event by which you worked so hard. Right. And you help people to recalibrate to get there so they can keep eyes on target to meet what they started doing in the first place. Could have been 20 years ago.
Yeah, and they're happier and more successful. So the path you laid out is spot on. So businesses grow from startup to the next phase, which is strategic expansion, where they're expanding a little bit more than they're growing. It's a long-term growth. Mm-hmm. They're expanding their products and their services and their staff and their capabilities, and all these processes get more complex. But they have a very wide but kind of flat organization. And what usually happens in the typical entity is eventually they'll sell. But will they sell for the maximum potential that they could have sold their company for? Sometimes they stagnate and go out of business. But if they're able to repurpose, capture a new vision, often what we see is strategic growth, not expansion, where now they're rising to a next level. They have more time for the things that you would want to do since you've worked 20 years in a business. Now you have more time for yourself once you transition to strategic. What's also really cool is now you're designing your company for that upward mobility, and often it becomes more valuable. So if you want to sell to other investors, now you're in a much more strategic position to sell the company. If you talk to business brokers, one of the things they'll tell you is when they engage clients, they spend 2-3 years getting the client ready to sell, both in leadership, processes, and profitability. Why not do that 10 years before and enjoy the fruits of your success and then sell for maximum value later on?
Well stated.
Or you might be at a position where you're buying competitors. Think big goals, big visions. The only difference between people that achieve big goals and those that achieve middle goals are the vision. That's the only difference. You create a new pathway in your mind and in your business to achieve bigger goals.
That is super inspirational. I think that, I don't know if there's anything else to say.
Yeah.
No,
I don't, there's not a whole, there's not a whole lot of times I get to the point where I was like, I think that we have said all that needs to be said, with the exception of, I love you. You're pretty great, but we can't do this without these guys. Guys, if you see a business owner or yourself as a business owner that are seeing you going, oh my goodness, here comes that brick wall. I'm going to go through it, above it, around it. I don't know how to do it. Let's make sure to check him out on on our website, which is thedailynewsnetwork.com. Remember to always live with gratitude.